UFO.
Documentary filmmaker James Fox created a fantastic documentary that I would definitely recommend people watch, called Moment of Contact, the Roswell of Brazil. What it investigates is a real-life incident that happened in Varginha, Brazil, of a alien flying saucer that crash-landed, and the occupants of that craft survived. They escaped the craft and were eventually found a few days later and arrested by military police. The Americans came in and flew them away back to America. It was heavily covered up. The documentary film is fascinating and very well done.
In 1996, the people of Varginha, Brazil, witnessed a UFO event that would change their lives forever.
Só que ele planava, ia perdendo lentamente a altitude e ia caminhando.
Followed another Roswell, if you will. That is a crashed vehicle that had beings on board.
Mas que eles não poderiam admitir a verdade, a população ia entrar em colapso.
Nada temos a esconder.
Finally, the facts will be revealed.
The Varginha case is considered the most well-kept secret in the military circles of Brazil.
My objective here is to put some clarity on what took place in Varginha, Brazil, January 1996.
Dois seres extraterrestres foram capturados e depois, posteriormente, foram levados para o hospital.
The witnesses are some of the most compelling testimony I've ever heard.
Meu nome é Carlos de Souza.
Meu nome é Cátia Xavier.
Meu nome é Liliane Silva.
Meu nome é Valquíria Silva.
Em 1996, eu vi uma criatura estranha ali.
Action! A lot of people in this town have a little piece of the puzzle.
Naquele local, eu vi o rastro da criatura, o pé.
Foi onde ele falou que eu vi era uma coisa sobrenatural.
This year,
Mark Pellicharese, he had captured this creature with his bare hands.
Você confirma que o seu irmão estava de serviço naquele dia 20?
Confirmo.
After he captured the creature, he developed this infection that wouldn't go away.
Foi pro CTI de manhã, 7 horas da manhã, 15 para o meio-dia, ele veio a óbito.
this can no longer be covered up.
They might shoot us because we're on the property.
This can't be denied.
Bateram na porta e aí eles falaram pra mim.
Ficar quieto. Se qualquer iria sofrer uma punição muito severa.
This was proof.
We pull this off. It'll be the most compelling testimony revealed.
Of contact.
Aqui, ó. Foi aqui.
This is a level of confirmation that only a handful of people on this planet have.
However, James Fox does leave out a critical, I think, piece of information that really should have been included in the film.
The meeting with, according to his book, that took place in the Humanitas Hospital with two doctors. I couldn't validate this and I didn't put it in the movie. But if there's two doctors who are listening to this, apparently the creature was alive. The one that Marco Chirizi brought into Humanitas Hospital was alive. And according to Dr. Roger Lear's book, everything else was accurate. I can't say if this was accurate or not, but he put it in his book, so I'm assuming that it is. And Uba Dajara won't talk about it. He's a witness. There were two doctors that claimed telepathic communication with the live entity. And that's in his book. Now, I'm not telling your audience that that's true. I'm telling your audience that it might be true. We know that that entity, that creature, that being, that ET, whatever you want to call it, went to Humanitas Hospital. We know that because we have testimony from the people that took it there. We have testimony from people on the inside that claimed it was there. But we don't have any testimony from the doctors that claimed there was a telepathic communication.
Do they talk at all about what it said?
It said that they felt sorry for the human species, not realizing their potential of who they really are. Like they're not. We don't realize as a race who we really are. That's what they said. It's in his book. So anyway,
what did they mean by that?
That we don't recognize. I mean, I'm not quite sure. I guess that we don't recognize the potential that we have as human beings, who we really are. I'm not sure what they meant exactly. More than that, But if Ubadajada Rodriguez is listening to this, please come forward and tell me who those doctors are. If the doctors are listening to this, they're still alive. What does it take? What will it take to get you to come forward? Anything. Just tell me what it takes.
We're talking about direct communication with the being in question. This being has been referred to as a demon by multiple different people.
Moment of contact, yeah.
So Varginha, Brazil, there was a crash landing, and apparently there was a being that was running around a town for a couple of days that was captured by the military. Or two beings, rather.
Yeah. So this was fascinating to watch, mostly because, to me, what was interesting, he's bringing he's bringing the framework of what I would call the secular idea of the UFO as extraterrestrial, crash lands, and then the government covers it up, and people are...
Men in black.
Yeah, and intimidated, and the being looks really creepy, these kinds of things. So all those elements are there. But what's also there, but what gets completely missed generally, is that this is in a Catholic country. And the people that first see the being, they're like, what is it, a demon? It's not a human. So they identify it, and there's a lore to demons as well. And part of that lore is that they have cloven feet, and they have a really terrible smell like sulfur. And both of these are mentioned many, many times. They come up repeatedly in the video. And I'm thinking, if I ever see him again, I'll say, hey, you brought up a lot of the religious stuff. But of course, he didn't see it because he's coming from a secular framework. But a person trained in religious studies is going to see that. Or a Catholic is going to see that. Somebody who's very Christian, they're not going to miss that.
Yeah, this kind of blew my mind when you told me this last night. You mentioned the Clovis feet and the smell of sulfur. Mm-hmm. And so you're saying that this is talked about a lot in some of these Catholic texts?
Yes. So I'm not saying that that's what it is, because I don't do that. But I'm pointing out that when people had these experiences in 1500, 1600, these are the same kinds of things that they would say. They would say it smelled like sulfur. They would talk about the feet and things like that. Now, there are a variety of different experiences that have patterns, historical patterns, but this is just one example.
And so people scream, demon, demon, it's a demon. But if you listen to the message that this being portrayed, I think the opinion might change. For anyone with an open mind, I think it's important to hear what this being said. This being has come from somewhere else, presumably quite far away. It would be silly of us not to kind of listen to the message that it had. But I will give you just a little bit of a background before one of these beings was captured by military police officers. The documentary basically covers a flying saucer, a UFO, that was in some kind of trouble. There was seemingly a hole in the side of it with smoke coming out. It was in trouble. It was going closer and closer towards the floor, and it crash landed. The beings did escape. This crash was witnessed by a local. It landed in a farm field, and very quickly military arrived and cordoned off the area and seized what they could. Apparently, the beings inside did manage to escape. They were missing for a few days, and a few days later they were seen in the actual town of Varginha. 3 girls witnessed a creature along a small pathway next to a wall in a grassy area. The 3 girls witnessed the creature cowering, looking scared and frightened, huddled up against the wall. It had glowing red eyes and an oily kind of brown skin, but was clearly afraid. The girls' reaction was naturally to scream and run away. They did describe a strong smell of ammonia and this kind of strong, kind of eggy smell, like a sulfur smell. Shortly after, the being was captured by military police and was taken to the hospital in Varginha, where it was studied by a couple of doctors and then actually taken away by the US military and taken back to America on board a plane. This particular book by Roger K. Lear, entitled UFO Crash in Brazil, a genuine UFO crash with surviving ETs, details interviews with the doctors from the hospital and one of these doctors describes a direct telepathic communication with the alien in question that was captured. James Fox chose to not include that in the documentary, which I think is a real shame, because I think the message needs to be heard, and if we have a message from one of these beings, I think people have a right to know what that message is. I'm going to read you a passage from the book. When we had finished the surgery for repair of the fracture, we were still highly tense. We did not know how the patient was going to respond to what we had done to it. We were also afraid if something untoward happened to the creature, that we would get the blame from the military and the punishment may be severe. Those thoughts were going through my head, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the room began to fill with a greenish mist. We all stepped back from the operating table. We did not immediately know where the origin of this mist, and feared it might be toxic. One of the operating room nurses began frantically banging on the operating room door, and a voice on the other side inquired if we were finished with the surgery. We told them that we were essentially finished, but there seemed to be a greenish gas collecting in the room, and we did not know the origin. With that, there was some heated conversation outside the operating room, and we were told to find the origin of the greenish substance and let them know. We did not know at this point whether it was a gas or a vapour or a mist, but finally realised it seemed to be emanating from the creature itself laying on the table. In deep fear, I walked slowly closer to it and approached the head of the table. Without consciously realising it, my gaze caught the eyes of the being. His eyes were glowing red and appeared as two swirling pools of liquid. They were pulling me in deeper and deeper, and all at once, giant proportions of information came pounding into my head. These were like thoughtgrams, large blocks of information, over and over, like something hitting me in the head with a hammer. I was also becoming dizzy and slightly nauseated. Dr. Lear then replies, "Undoubtedly you survived this ordeal. Can you tell us what were these thought messages?" All that I'm willing to tell you at this time is what the creature told me about human beings. I also want to tell you he downloaded a tremendous amount of knowledge into my head. It caused me to have headaches, lasting for over 2 weeks following the event. Essentially, he told me that his race felt very sorry for the human beings for basically 2 reasons. The first is that all humans have the same potential and abilities to perform the very same things his race could do. Those things we find so marvelous and magical, but humans did not know how to do them. For example, he told me in cases where there is injury or disease to the body, it would not be necessary to confine one of his species to a special treatment facility, such as the one he was confined in at the moment. He told me that they either individually or joined together could produce all the healing necessary to repair their bodies. The second reason they felt sorry for us was we did not seem to realise we were spiritual beings, only living in a temporary shell, and we were totally disconnected from our spiritual self. Dr. Lear then responded, "That is a fascinating piece of information. Can you tell us any further things that you learned?" "No, that is all we are willing to share at this time." Dr. Lear replied, "What happened to the creature when you left the room?" "We checked on the being from time to time. He seemed stable and had a fantastic rate of healing. The wound healed completely in less than 24 hours. This was also true of the bone. It was completely mended within the same period of time. Then the military took the creature out of the back door of the hospital." So there we are hearing a direct message from a being from another world, and his message was quite simple. we've forgotten that we are spiritual beings and that we are capable of a lot more than we realize. And when I look at this statement, I think to myself, is there anything about it that we can provably show is true? Is there anything happening in the world right now that would back up that kind of statement? And what comes to my mind is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who you may or may not have heard of. He wrote a couple of books. One of the more popular ones is called Becoming Supernatural. Dr. Joe Dispenza uses meditation techniques and breathing techniques and control of mind, thoughts, feelings and emotions, and utilizes something that he calls heart-brain coherence. What he's getting quite a reputation for is seemingly the miracles that happen of the people that practice these kinds of methods, including spontaneous healings. People that have life-threatening diseases like terminal cancers have practiced this method of meditation, breathing, control of the mind, thoughts and emotions, and overcoming their belief that they are sick. And Joe describes a unified field, and that the forms come from the field, and the illness is like a kind of a disruption in the field that you can correct through heart-mind connection and meditation and elevated emotions. And you basically, to make it very simple, although I would encourage you to study his work further to understand better, but to make it very simple, you believe, think, feel the way that you see yourself in the future, completely healthy, completely healed. There is no sickness in you. There is no cancer left. You're just free, happy, surrendered. Also, you're not trying to heal. You just surrender that it's already done. But it's this elevated emotion and this kind of meditative technique that seems to produce miraculous results.
Hi all, my name is Eefje. I'm, I think a living example of that this work really works. So basically, Joe, the former me, so the old me, was diagnosed about, I think, 3 years ago with cervical cancer. I had surgery and was thought to be, okay. But, the cancer got back in like a couple of months, and they said it was so severe, it was so aggressive. It had, I don't know, in a couple of months spread out all across, my whole belly to the peritoneum, I think. So the lining, across all your organs. And, there was tumors the size of kiwis, the size of, there was like a whole big fruit basket in there. It was a mess. They said, we looked at the scan, and they said it's all white. I guess it's covered all over. So basically, they said there's a 0% chance you're gonna survive. Sorry. I had the healing on the last day. And when I walked into the room, I felt it already. I knew I was okay. And I laid down, and you people, they were still standing up, still putting their hands over their hearts. And I lay down on the ground, and instantly my body started shaking. And I was like this, and that went on and on and on. And at some point, I think it felt like something just grabbed here, something inside of me, and just pulled it out. And I thought, it's gone, it's lifted, it really...
Listen closely, because that was the experience, yes? Now, there should be an effect in her biology as a result of it, yes or no?
Yes, so, here comes the cool part. So, and it happened, and I was laughing and crying, and I felt so blessed, and I went home the same night, and I came home, and I told my husband, I think I'm okay, I think I'm healed. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, it's difficult with cancer. It's not like I could instantly see or anything. So I was like, okay, now now I feel I'm okay, but we have to prove it, because otherwise people are not going to believe me. So we went for a scan, just before we came to this event, I had the results, and I've done a PET CT scan, and they actually pulled me through twice to make sure. And there came the words I thought I would never hear from a person wearing a white coat. But he said, you know what? There's absolutely nothing to worry about. There's no single trace of cancer left in your body.
And you can watch numerous testimonials of people recovering from cancer, blind people seeing, deaf people hearing. It's genuinely quite amazing to listen to these testimonials of seemingly normal people going through tremendous amount of suffering and completely healing and transforming themselves into a brand new person where that disease, that illness, that problem no longer exists for them. At Joe Dispenza's events, he does events where there's about 2,000 people that go and they practice these meditative techniques. They do a healing session, and so someone will be volunteered and they will lie down on the floor, and a ring of people will come around them and place their hands out like this, and they'll open up their hearts to love, and they'll just pour love towards the person on the floor, and quite amazing things happen. Is this what this being is describing? This connection to the unified field, this deeper level of reality and consciousness, and that when we connect to that and surrender to that and open our hearts to love and higher emotions, that the body can heal itself without drugs, without operations, but naturally we have the capacity to heal ourselves. There is a study going on with Joe Dispenza at the moment with a university where they're studying blood work, brain scans, heart scans. They're diving into the science of this technique and why it works and mystical experiences. But it seems to mirror what this being from another world has said, that we too have the capacity to heal ourselves, but we don't know how to do it. And then the being said that we were spiritual beings, but that we've forgotten that. And if you look at Joe Dispenza again, just as an example, he's the one that comes to mind for me personally, is you can hear so many testimonials of people going through dramatic spiritual experiences, energy flowing through the body and bliss and mystical visions, out-of-body experiences, people leaving their bodies, people having visions of angels. It's quite intense what some of the people experience.
Saturday morning, when we're doing the pineal gland meditation, when I walked into the room, I felt this angelic presence everywhere, and I smelled jasmine and rose. And it was such, I thought that the room was sprayed with something. I was convinced that everyone could smell it. And I wasn't sure what was the second smell, but rose was recognizable to me. And it was just filled with love, if you may. And you know how you smell something and after a few minutes you get used to it, so you're not aware of it anymore? I could smell it and inhale it every single time I would take a breath in. So that was incredible, but I was not aware that it wasn't the fragrance in the room. So I saw during the meditation that the beings of light, many of them, and I saw them all the way around, holding the grid for all of us. They were guarding all of us, and then there were many angelic presences in the corners. Everything was becoming clear as we were going through the week, and I recognized a perfect order. Everything is in perfect order. And I also, one more thing, when we're walking in the circle in the coherence healing, to me became obvious and clear that we are servants. That we are servants to the higher power. Like, I feel like my ego has died and it no longer has place, and it was replaced with wholesomeness and fulfillment and just love, and it's just this feeling of belonging in the family. But I now clearly remember, it's not something I've learned, it's something that I have reminded myself, that we all are extensions of the source, and it's almost like we're little tubes of energy, and when you have an ego build up, it clogs it, right? And that creates misalignment. But when there's no clog, and we're just the channel, which we have to, in a sense, I don't want to say obey, but we, like I say, we serve. We receive abundance of fulfillment and love as an extension of the source. And I'm so humbled by the experience and the reminder of who we are and where we're from.
And so everything that the being said lines up with things in our own world that's happening right now that we are only just kind of discovering about ourselves. Another ability which is becoming more recognized recently is telepathy through the work of the Telepathy Tapes, which is a fantastic podcast which I recommend people watch, discussing children with autism, non-speaking children that seem to display telepathic abilities, things that we would think of as magical in a way that, you know, previously we kind of denied its existence. Now it's becoming more and more established that there is actually something to that, and the world isn't quite what we thought it was, and that we as humans have a far greater potential than we realize. To label this being that has that level of compassion for us, that sees us suffering and feels sorry for us, to label him as a demon because you don't like the way he looks because of his eyes and because of his smell, I think is very sad. That being is clearly a spiritual being. He's told us that we are two spiritual beings, and if he's capable of healing himself and healing his friends and his family, you know, their species, they heal each other. That takes love, that takes compassion, that takes kindness. Do you think that those are qualities of a demonic creature? Do you think that that kind of quality of compassion for another species that you see is suffering in ignorance because they don't know who they are, they don't know that they're spiritual beings, that kind of compassion and empathy could come from something that you would call a demon or demonic? I really don't think so. I think it's a mislabeling because we fear the appearance. Maybe people in the past, you know, hundreds of years ago or 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago had some kind of contact with these beings in the past, and they were scared. They were scared of the appearance. They automatically judged it as demonic, but they don't really know. They're just going off appearance, and then it gets written down in a book that these are the qualities of demons. Has to have red eyes, has to smell bad, you know, such and such and such. In the modern day, we come across a being that looks this way and we judge it immediately as demonic. And yet it shows empathy, kindness, love, healing. It just doesn't make sense. I think we've got the wrong lens. We're looking through the wrong lens. That's it. I hope James Fox gets to interview that doctor one day and maybe do a video on it. That would be fantastic. But for now, he decided to leave that out of the documentary, which makes me a little sad. I think it would have hit harder if that message had been included. For me, it's a lesson in not judging by appearances. We might find the appearance of these beings terrifying or scary, but the quality of their heart might be completely different. We have to kind of drop the assumption of the way that something looks about the quality of the inside. You know, this is clearly a beautiful being, in my opinion, based on that message. All I can hope is that the US military that took these beings look after them properly and treat them well with kindness. It would be heartbreaking if they were mistreated in any kind of way, and I hope, to be quite honest, that they were returned where they could go back home to their own people, to their own kind, because in the documentary it is said that it was seen that a search craft came down after they had been taken, and it was doing a search grid pattern, searching the streets, looking for their friends, which broke my heart, to be honest. I thought that was so sad that the rescue party was just a little bit too late. It's a fascinating story. I believe it's a true event. please do watch the documentary if you haven't, and take the message seriously. I think it's important. Thank you for watching. I will see you again. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.
Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere.